I still remember very clearly the chill that ran through me the first time I saw Manhattan swallowed by darkness. Streets so empty they felt unsettling. The wind howling through ruined buildings sounded less like background noise and more like a warning. And then, a man with an eye patch stepped out of the shadows, and I couldn't look away. Back then, I told myself that Escape from New York was just a grim 1980s action movie, an imagined future, a simple what-if America collapsed game. But what turned Escape from New York into a legend wasn't on the screen. It was hidden in the behind-the-scenes secrets few people knew until the cast themselves revealed them. Can you believe it? A US president who had once been a prisoner of war, a director's personal resentment that nearly erased the female lead from the film, and even a stuntman who almost lost his life because of a club fitted with real spikes. Below are 15 stories revealed by the cast of Escape from New York decades later. Don't forget to leave a like before we dive into the first secret. 15. Kurt Russell admits, "Out of all the films I've ever made, this is the one I love the most." When Escape from New York was released, no one called it a safe choice. It was bleak, cold, almost hostile to its audience, and Kurt Russell, still boxed in by his Disney kid image at the time, was hardly the name Hollywood trusted to carry an anti-hero like Snake Plissken. Years later, Russell finally said something simple yet weighty. "Out of all the films I've ever made, this is the one I love the most. Not because of box office success, not because of fame, but because this was the first time he was allowed to do less, and because of that to be himself more." Russell has said that Snake Plissken is the character he loved most in his career. Snake doesn't talk much, and I like that he once laughed. He doesn't need to explain who he is. He just exists. Snake gave Russell a kind of hero Hollywood rarely embraces: silent, indifferent, unwilling to beg for sympathy. A man who walks slowly, eyes cold, promising nothing, and asking for no one's approval. That's why the behind-the-scenes conflicts were never accidental. From Russell objecting to the scene where Snake throws a cigarette into the president's face to the smallest details of how Snake stands, walks, and stays silent. Those were moments when Russell quietly said no to protect the character. Escape from New York didn't give Kurt Russell the biggest role of his life, but it gave him the most honest one, a role that no matter how many years pass, he has never truly left behind in his memory. 14. Adrienne Barbeau recalled, "At the time, I honestly thought I was looking at a real New York that had collapsed." You probably still remember the image of a Manhattan without human voices. Darkened buildings standing still like corpses. Endless avenues where light seemed to be swallowed the moment it touched the ground. A city too ruined, too silent to feel like a mere constructed set. Adrienne Barbeau thought so too. "At the time, I truly believed I was looking at a New York that had collapsed," she recalled many years after Escape from New York left theatres. Barbeau said no one on set questioned it. The ruined buildings and pitch-black avenues were convincing enough to need no explanation. The cold, heavy, motionless atmosphere made people forget they were standing on a soundstage rather than in an abandoned city. Only years later did she learn that the entire Manhattan was just a miniature model built in a studio and lit with such care that it fooled the eye. But what stunned me, Barbeau said, was that the city didn't disappear when the film ended. After Escape from New York wrapped, the model wasn't dismantled. It was transferred to another project drenched in neon lights, rain and smoke, and reborn as the future Los Angeles of Blade Runner. 2 films, 2 dystopian worlds, but only one city allowed to live a second life. 13. James Cameron reveals, "Back then, I was just the guy sitting in the corner drawing." You might not know the man sitting in that corner when Escape from New York was being made. Not in front of the camera, not making decisions, not named on the poster. Just someone bent over a drawing board, quietly filling in shadows no one noticed. That man was James Cameron in those years. On the set of Escape from New York, his job was so simple, it was almost invisible matte painting. Cameron spent hours painting cracked walls, darkened windows, the outlines of a dead Manhattan. Not to impress anyone, but to deceive the eye. There were no grand sets, no stage lights, just paint drawing boards and a patient stretched to exhaustion. "No one on set thought much about me," Cameron said. "And at the time, I didn't think I was doing anything important." But in that dark corner, Cameron learned the most important lessons of all: how space creates emotion, how light determines the life or death of a frame, and how scale can make a fake world feel more real than reality itself. No one knew it while he was painting those ruined walls. But years later, when the Terminator, Titanic and Avatar appeared one after another, people finally realised those massive worlds were conceived in that very small, shadowed corner. 12. John Carpenter said it outright, he didn't like Maggie. I still remember very clearly the first time Maggie appeared in Escape from New York. Just a woman standing in the middle of a rotting world, wary eyes, a rigid stride, and a strange feeling she wasn't waiting for anyone to save her. Maggie entered the story as if she had been there for a long time, already surviving on instinct rather than dialogue. But later, when the people involved began telling the truth, something far more uncomfortable came to light. Maggie was never meant to be allowed to become that person. There was one thing John Carpenter said very plainly, and he never tried to make it sound nicer. I hated the character Maggie. There was a small scene that made the problem immediately clear to the entire crew. Maggie stands next to Brain. In the script, she only needs to listen and then walk away. When the camera rolled, Adrienne Barbeau paused for half a beat just to look. A very slight breath, like the reflex of a real human being. Cut. John Carpenter stepped in and said briefly, "Faster. Don't stop." They had to shoot it a third time when Maggie walked away immediately. No looking back. No lingering emotion. The scene worked. No one argued. No one said anything out loud. But everyone understood Barbeau hadn't done anything wrong, she had acted too truthfully. Barbeau didn't play Maggie like a supporting role. She brought into the character a toughness drawn from real life, a sense of experience that didn't need flashy dialogue. And gradually, something Carpenter had never planned began to happen. Audiences started to connect with Maggie. She became the film's second emotional centre. Not because of the script, but because of the performance. That was what unsettled Carpenter. Not because Barbeau acted poorly, on the contrary, because she acted too well. In Carpenter's eyes, Maggie was doing the most dangerous thing possible to the film, giving it emotion. And for a director, determined to build a cold, indifferent world where people are merely pieces in a decaying system that was a structural disruption. 11. Lee Van Cleef shared, "I walked into this film right after knee surgery. Do you remember the feeling every time Bob Houck appeared on screen? Just a man standing straight, a low, decisive voice, eyes cold as steel, enough to make an entire room fall silent. Everything looked solid, authoritative, exactly like a military commander used to giving orders and being obeyed. Enough to make viewers believe this was a character who never wavered, never tired, never weakened. But that was only what we saw on screen. Throughout the filming of Escape from New York, Van Cleef was working with a body that hadn't yet recovered. Standing for long periods was painful, moving hurt even more. And the shooting schedule showed no mercy. Everything took place at night, stretched over long hours, repeated again and again, giving his knee no time to rest. There were scenes where I was just standing there, Van Cleef recalled, but my knee felt like it was about to give out. He didn't complain on set. He didn't ask for fewer scenes. He didn't request retakes. Every slow step, every turn to deliver an order was an act of gritted endurance. The irony is that audiences never saw any of this. On screen, Bob Houck appeared as a cold, upright commander, eyes unflinching voice, firm, a symbol of power and control. No sign of weakness, not a single moment of hesitation. And so from a body barely holding together minute by minute, an imposing image was created so cold that no one guessed it was built on real pain. 10. Ox Baker admitted, "That club nearly killed me." You might not notice it right away the first time you watch that fight scene. Firelight reflecting off the arena floor, the crowd screaming as if it could swallow everything whole. And a brutal swing of a club, ugly, unheroic, nothing but raw violence. On screen, it's a moment that makes the audience hold its breath. But in real life, the entire set had already stopped breathing long before that. Only years later, when Ox Baker finally spoke up, did the truth emerge, and it permanently changed the memory of that scene. "That club nearly killed me." Baker said the nails on the club were real nails, not rubber, not props, no camera trick. The only thing protecting him was a thin wooden board hidden under his clothes, shoved into place hastily before the camera rolled. "They only told me one thing," Baker recalled. "It'll be fine." The moment Kurt Russell swung the club, the set fell completely silent. No one was acting. No one dared breathe loudly. Everyone understood half an inch off and the nails could have gone straight into Baker's body. When the take ended, there was no applause, no cheers for "We got it." We looked at each other for a few seconds. Baker said the kind of look people share after walking out of somewhere they never should have entered, and realizing they were lucky to still be standing. On film, it's a vicious action scene. In reality, it was a gamble with flesh and bone, and Escape from New York survived it by luck, not by design. 9. Donald Pleasence revealed, "Not every fear on screen is acted." When the president appears in Escape from New York, many viewers sense that something is off. He isn't panicked like the hostages Hollywood usually gives us. No screaming, no begging, no attempt to maintain authority, just a man sitting there, eyes drifting, voice flat, as if he has already accepted that he no longer has control. Many years later, Donald Pleasence explained the reason with striking bluntness. "I didn't need to imagine what it feels like to be imprisoned." During World War II, Pleasence had been a real-life prisoner of war, and when he stepped into this role, he didn't build the character from the script, but from personal memories of having choice stripped away, of being confined in a space where power no longer meant anything. That's why Pleasence deliberately avoided playing panic. He chose emptiness, resignation, a mental state in which a person understands that resistance or pleading is pointless. What audiences took for subtle acting was in fact a lived experience, and perhaps that is why it feels so cold and uncomfortably real. 8. Adrienne Barbeau revealed a secret about the final scene. It was shot in the director's garage. You might assume that the ending was carefully planned from the beginning. A quiet moment, closing Maggie's fate with starkness, no music, no climax. But the truth was the complete opposite. Adrienne Barbeau later revealed that the scene was never part of the original plan. When principal photography ended, John Carpenter realized there was a fatal gap in the film's structure. There was no image that truly closed Maggie's fate. No money left, no time left, no way to rebuild a set. The solution came in near desperation at the director's garage. No cinematic lighting, no set design, just cold concrete. Barbeau lay there motionless. A handheld camera drifted past. Makeshift light fell across her face. And that was how one of the film's most haunting moments was born, not from a grand idea, but from extreme lack. Ironically, that very bareness created a ruthlessly authentic feeling. A death with no romanticism, no performance, just a body left behind perfectly. In keeping with the world Carpenter was building, even though he never intended Maggie to become such an emotional focal point. 7. Isaac Hayes, when a villain is built from details no one asked for. If you look closely at Duke, you'll notice he is never completely still. There's a subtle instability in his eyes, a sense that he's holding something back, not clear enough to name but enough to make viewers uneasy. That detail was never in the script. Isaac Hayes later admitted that he gave Duke a small tick of his own whenever he faced Snake Plissken. His eyes would twitch slightly, almost unconsciously. Just a reflex, Hayes once said. But a villain shouldn't be too stable. He didn't warn the director. He didn't ask for permission. He just did it because to Hayes, a crime lord couldn't remain perfectly calm when confronted with a real threat. Ironically, the detail is barely emphasized in the final cut. It flashes by faint something many viewers never notice. But that says a great deal about how Escape from New York was made a film where actors quietly left their marks, even knowing that no one might name them. No one might credit them, and sometimes, only they would know it ever existed. When an entire city believed a real disaster had just happened. That morning, bad news spread faster than smoke. Radio reports spoke of a plane crash in the middle of the city. Newspapers ran shocking headlines. Residents poured into the streets in panic, asking one another if anyone knew the passengers on that flight. Police sealed off areas. Fire trucks wailed. Every reflex of a real catastrophe appeared except for the one crucial fact: it never happened. The truth was that the Escape from New York crew had purchased a real airplane wreck, transported it from Arizona to St. Louis, cut it apart, set it up in the street, and added smoke and lighting. The realism exceeded all expectations. The press was fooled. The public was fooled. The city fell into panic because Hollywood had crossed the boundary of the set. No one was hurt. There was no tragedy. But for several days, St. Louis lived inside a manufactured nightmare. It was a rare moment when cinema didn't imitate reality, it intruded into it. And when the truth came out, people realized some scenes are so real, they no longer belong to film at all. 5. The crew lived from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. for months. For many months, the Escape from New York crew lived on a strange biological clock. Work began at 6 p.m. Retreat came at 6 a.m. When the sun went down, a fake Manhattan rose inside the real city of St. Louis. Smoke filled the air. Cold lights sliced across avenues. Burned blackened steel appeared like the wreckage of stranded ships. By dawn, everything vanished. Bulldozers moved in. City workers restored the streets to normal. Residents woke up and went to work as if no hell had existed the night before. Then evening came and the cycle repeated. A two-faced city where the same street was harmless by day and dystopian by night. The exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was the feeling of being trapped inside the very film they were making. Actors, technicians, the director. Everyone lived in darkness for too long to clearly distinguish set from reality. And perhaps that's why the cold atmosphere on screen didn't need to be acted. It was cultivated by that inverted rhythm of life itself. 4. When a film about a kidnapped president featured the real president's son. There are secrets that if left untold, you would never believe such a strange coincidence existed. In Escape from New York, amid the chaos aboard Air Force One, a Secret Service agent briefly appears on screen. A tiny role, no memorable dialogue, but the man playing him was Stephen Ford, the son of Gerald Ford, the 38th President of the United States. The paradox is this: the film is about a president being kidnapped, and within it appears the son of a real president. Not an allegory, not intentional satire, just a historically uncanny coincidence where Hollywood and politics intersect in an otherwise unremarkable frame. For the crew, it was a behind-the-scenes anecdote. For film history, it became an accidental layer of irony. A fictional world about the fragility of power and a real life stepping into that fragile space. No one emphasized it, no one explained it, but once you know, you can never watch that scene again without a chill. 3. When Snake meets a woman who was his real-life wife. There's a very brief moment in Escape from New York that many people overlook. Snake Plissken walks down a dark street. A woman appears. No climax, no romance, just a few short lines, and they part like strangers in a world accustomed to separation. What audiences couldn't know at the time was that woman was Kurt Russell's real-life wife, Susan Hubley. It was also Hubley's first role after she had just given birth to their son. A deeply personal, very human moment placed inside a film that is otherwise cold and indifferent. The irony is striking. On-screen Snake shows no attachment, no lingering look, no promise. An indifferent man walks past the very woman he was bound to in real life. That intersection creates a feeling that's hard to name. As if Escape from New York isn't only telling a story about people trapped inside a ruthless system, but also unintentionally recording fragments of real lives passing across the screen. No explanation, no emphasis, but once you know, you can never watch it the same way again. 2. A film called New York that was barely shot in New York. You believe you've seen Manhattan collapse, scorched avenues, ruined neighborhoods, a New York so abandoned it barely recognizes itself. But the truth is, there is almost no New York in the film at all. Most of Escape from New York was shot in St. Louis, a city that had recently suffered major fires, leaving behind blackened, devastated areas that required almost no set construction. To John Carpenter, it was the perfect future. Manhattan. Cheap, convincing, and deadly enough. Only one scene was actually shot in real New York, the camera move past the Statue of Liberty. An iconic image. A visual stamp of authenticity. Enough to make audiences believe everything else was New York too. And so a paradox was born. A film named New York that convinced the world of the city's collapse while being built largely from a completely different place. 1. A film once rejected for being too dark to exist. Before it became an icon, Escape from New York was a script no one wanted to touch. Too violent, too bleak, too cold toward America itself. The idea of Manhattan turned into a massive prison where the government would willingly sacrifice an entire city to maintain order was considered unacceptable in the early 1970s. Studios rejected it. No negotiations. No script revisions. The project sat dormant for years. Only after Halloween became an unexpected success did John Carpenter gain what he needed, the power to resurrect an idea that had been buried. Not because Hollywood suddenly embraced that darkness, but because they began to believe in the man creating it. And so a script, once deemed too cold to be filmed, was finally greenlit without changing its nature, without softening its message. Escape from New York emerged like a survivor, born at the wrong time but alive long enough to become a legend. Perhaps that's why, even today, the film still feels like something that shouldn't exist but somehow does. Escape from New York isn't just a movie you once watched. It's a chain of things that shouldn't have existed but somehow did. In hindsight, it feels like a film assembled from cracks short on money, short on time, short on consensus, yet overflowing with risk. Lived experience and people unwilling to follow the mold. Which secret impressed you the most? Leave your thoughts below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to continue exploring the hidden stories behind Hollywood's golden age.